This is a reading of Ranger in Time, Night of Soldiers and Spies by Kate Mesner. At this point, I'm going to encourage you to take out your book and follow along with me as I begin Chapter 1. Chapter 1, No Lights, No Sound. Chapter 1, Vocabulary. Number 1, Mission. A combat operation assigned to a person or military unit. Number 2, Regiment. A military unit consisting of up to 10 companies. The British Infantry Regiment was about 800 soldiers, while for the Continental Army, a regiment was about 470 soldiers. Number 3, ferry. To transport people, vehicles, or goods by boat across a body of water such as a river or bay. Number 4, rebels. A term referring to colonists who fought against the British Crown in the late 1700s, also called patriots, continentals, Yankees, Whigs, or colonials. Number 5, ventured. Dared to do something or go somewhere that may be dangerous or unpleasant. Number 6, revolution. Specifically, the American Revolution. The War of 1775 through 1783, in which 13 British colonies in North America broke free from British rule and became the United States of America, called also, chiefly British, the American War of Independence. Grand Banks. An extensive shoal southeast of Newfoundland. Fishing grounds. 350 miles long, 40,000 square miles. And you can see that on the map. Number 7, patriot. American colonists who rejected British rule during the American Revolution, also called a Whig. Number 8, independence. Freedom from control or influence of another or others. Number 10, fretting. Being constantly or visibly worried or anxious. Number 11, sloops. One-masted sailboats with a fore and aft mainsail and a jib. And you can see the pictures below. Number 12, anxious. Experiencing worry, unease, or nervousness, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. Chapter 1, reading. No lights, no sound. Isaac Pope held the flat-bottomed boat steady while soldiers waded into the river and loaded supplies. Quickly, an officer whispered through the pounding rain, "We must have every man across before dawn." Isaac nodded but didn't answer aloud. No lights, no sound. That was the order. This mission had to be silent and secret. Anything else would mean disaster. The boat sank lower in the water until Isaac signaled that it was full. He and the other sailors of the 14th Continental Regiment used poles to push off from shore. It was their second trip of the night. Their task felt impossible. Ferry 9,000 troops across the mile-long stretch of river between Long Island and New York. Horses and supplies had to be moved too, all before the sun came up and the British troops realized the American rebels were fleeing. Anyone left behind would be taken prisoner. For 2 days, General George Washington's Continental Army had battled British soldiers in the rain. But then the rebels found themselves surrounded. All day, British troops had ventured closer, digging ditches so they could advance without being exposed to gunfire. In another day, they'd be within musket range, and Washington's army would have to surrender. The revolution would be over almost as soon as it began. Crossing the East River in darkness was their only hope. Isaac pulled harder on his oar. His head had been pounding all day. His muscles were aching even before he started rowing. Now they burned with every stroke. But if anyone could get this job done, it was the men of the 14th Continental Regiment. Most had been sailors and fishermen together in Marblehead, Massachusetts, before they signed up for the Continental Army. When the British had closed the Grand Banks to fishing, Isaac and the other men were furious. How would they provide for their families? That was when many of the Marblehead's fishermen made the decision to join the Patriot cause and fight for independence from Great Britain. The commander of their regiment was Colonel John Glover, who took pride in his fishermen's determination and bravery. They had faced long journeys at sea together. They had weathered the wild storms of the Grand Banks. Now General Washington was trusting them with his entire army. When the New York shore was near and the water shallow enough, the soldiers piled out. Isaac shivered and headed back for another trip. His whole body shook with chills. He was weak with hunger. The driving rain and wind had made it nearly impossible to light fires for cooking. He'd eaten nothing but raw pork and rock-hard biscuits for 2 days, and there were still so many troops to move. When Isaac's boat made it back to Brooklyn Heights, the men were fretting and whispering. One of the soldiers leaned into him. "The tide's turning," he hissed. "Between that and the wind, we can't navigate the sloops anymore. We won't make it." Isaac looked at his flat-bottomed boat, already filling with anxious men. Without the larger sloops helping to move men, they'd never get everyone across the river before dawn. Isaac felt dizzy. He imagined the redcoats waking at first light to find hundreds of Continental soldiers trapped in Brooklyn. Isaac's ears still rang from the gunfire of the day before. He had crouched behind a stone wall, his heart pounding against the musket he'd held tight to his chest. They'd fought bravely, but how long could they go on? George Washington's troops were beaten down. They'd held out for 2 days against an army twice their size, but now they were surrounded. Could they possibly escape before dawn? Chapter 1, Comprehension Questions. Number 1, who are the rebels and what is Isaac Pope helping them do during the cover of darkness? Sample answer. The rebels were colonists who fought under the command of General George Washington against the British Crown. These rebels were also called patriots, Continentals, Yankees, Whigs, or Colonials. Isaac Pope was helping these rebels flee under the cover of night from advancing British troops. You can see the painting below, which illustrates this activity. Question number 2. Why is George Washington asking the men of the 14th Continental Regiment to ferry 9,000 members of the Continental Army off Long Island and across the East River to Manhattan? Sample answer. George Washington is asking members of the 14th Continental Regiment to take American troops off Long Island and across the East River to Manhattan to keep British forces from capturing these 9,000 American troops. Note, the American troops on Long Island are surrounded by British forces in the area of Long Island known as Brooklyn, and you can see that on the map below.